Good call on the water dilemma. We should probably have had music as people are entering.
Oh yeah.
You gotta keep the water nearby, just to have it. It's always good.
It is.
Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Trina Limpert, and my fellow panelists and I are very excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Keeping Women in the Workplace: What Organizations Can Do to Best Support Them with Equity. Before we get started, let me introduce myself a bit more as your moderator during the next hour. I am a third-year student at the University of Texas in Austin, earning a degree in Human Development and Family Sciences with a minor in Entrepreneurship and Food and Society. Additionally, this fall marks my third semester being part of the Women's Initiative for Entrepreneurship and Leadership Development Program, also known as WILD. This organization creates the infrastructure to guide women from diverse backgrounds, such as myself, into leadership and executive roles in corporate America. I am thrilled to be joined with such an impressive set of panelists as we guide this conversation through highlighting gender and race obstacles in the business world. Spearheading the discussion are our accomplished panelists, Trina Limpert, Zuleemah Edwards, and Stacey Guillen. Trina is the CEO and founder of RizeNext Corporation, a business strategy and education consulting corporation assisting organizations to successfully execute equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. She is known for being a passionate leader and has created a company that offers a unique blend of experiences in driving engagement and operational execution to meet diversity and inclusion initiatives. Welcome, Trina.
Thank you.
Zuleemah Edwards is a National Director, Strategic Alliances of INROADS, a nonprofit organization that creates a pathway to create the ethnically diverse high school and college students across the country, and positions graduates to advance in their careers, as well as help employers foster diverse and inclusive workspaces. In her role, Zuleemah leads the growth and development of INROADS, strategic partnerships, as well as collaborations with multi-year corporate partners to advance goals and drive impact and positive change in the community. She also oversees the organization's portfolio of national signature fundraising and activations. Zuleemah is a passionate community impact, specifically around youth and women's cause. She has served on many committees and initiatives in the Atlanta area where she resides. Zuleemah is a graduate of Spelman College, is an Afro-Caribbean Latino descent, and originally from New York City. Welcome, Zuleemah.
Thank you.
As for Stacey Guillen, she is part of the Kanarys family, and she advises and empowers companies across multiple industries to transfer DEI with data. Stacey is a one-on-one with clients to help them implement DEI information strategies in several areas, including talent acquisition, retention, and performance reviews. She serves on multiple boards and leadership committees in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that focus on creating avenues for higher education, empowerment, entrepreneurship, civic engagement, and health equity. Hello, Stacey.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So let's get started for our questions today. My first question will be for Ms. Trina. This session was noticeably clear movement that occurred in the workplace due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Why do you think it took a global pandemic to really dive deep into conversations about inequities women face in the workplace?
Thanks, Pretasia. So happy to be
Mhm.
here. And I love this question. It's one that I've lived real life for the last few years. I think all of us have. But one of the things that wasn't in my bio is that I co-founded an organization a few years ago called Tech Moms. And we help women transition into the tech industry. And a lot of it relays, and we've seen the impacts of COVID. As we've put that program together, we were actually launching this pre-COVID, had started fundraising, creating the organization, getting things up and off the ground, and then COVID hits and the lockdown happens. And I remember a very distinct moment with myself and my two co-founders as we were deciding, do we continue this work? Like, we felt very passionate about more women in the tech industry, empowering them, giving them expanded opportunity. We knew the benefits of remote working. We didn't realize how much that was going to become a thing as we started going. And I remember having this meeting one evening. It was super late, and we're like, do we keep going? Like, what's happening like in the middle of COVID, and what's going to be going on? And we all just knew that we needed to continue our work. And so we launched in the middle of quarantine. And fortunately, we had openings in the end of 2020. We were able to run our workshops and curriculum and training with social distancing and face masks and temperature checks, and started moving women into more advanced and critical skilled roles. And what we found as we did this was it was the most needed timing. The ability to work remotely became very, very important in this shift that we're seeing and continuing to support right now. That flexibility for being able to find what I don't like to use the word balance, because that assumes equity between those two things. It's harmony. How do I find harmony in my life? And a lot of women, that what happened during the recession, or not the recession, the female recession from the workplace, and 4.5 million leaving the workforce in just November alone of 2020, what we saw is that they were just not able to understand that it's not life or work, it's an and the importance of finding this and. How do I do all that I need to within this? The pandemic created some of this awareness of mental health and a better way to be able to focus on the individual needs of each worker and the burdens that they might be needing to meet within life at that time, especially, was really important. But we've also seen a lot of women leaving certain positions in order to find this ability in certain roles. And that's why we say tech jobs or mom jobs, is because it provides a lot more opportunity for some of this harmony within your life, being able to have remote working and higher pay, and being able to provide for my family, and starting to find this and within our lives. And so, even though that impact from COVID was so heavy for the whole world, that silver lining we're seeing of still continuing to benefit for these transitions and life transformations ultimately to be happening.
Wow, really, really great. Thank you so much. And it sounds like a lot of the expectations have changed for women and what they expect to get out of their jobs, and a lot more flexibility, which is really amazing.
Yes.
So I move on to my next question. As we know, August is Black Business Month. Why is it critical for businesses, for the business world, to acknowledge the different challenges Black business leaders face when compared to their white counterparts?
Yeah, and I'm so glad for this question, and it allowed me to kind of reflect on my own journey as in starting as a founder, as well as a lot of my work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So prior to me founding my consulting company, I worked for eBay. I've been in the tech industry for 30 years, and always involved from a community perspective, from an equality perspective, really have always just felt passionate in seeing that. And it wasn't until probably the end of my career time there, I started doing diversity work across all of our communities, not just women. So I was the global president of Women in IT We had about 1,500 members in 17 countries and oversaw programs for that. And I started to expand in doing diversity initiatives across all of our communities with our Black employees, our Latinx, LGBTQ, Asian, veterans, disabilities, and really started to get a broader understanding of some of the challenges, but also my own privileges. And I think for me, my own journey in this space and understanding that was to step back and listen. And I knew the challenges I had, so it allowed me to have a little bit of more empathy, but understanding that there were things that I wasn't dealing with that my fellow Black employees were dealing with. And how do we create more awareness? And I think this also starts translating as a business owner and founder of a company, as you start to see those same biases and stereotypes and issues in limiting our ability to really move forward. And what I find the challenge is that we're going to be missing out on a lot of great innovation in the world and a lot of impactful things if we keep doing this. And so I think the key for me and my perspective was understanding my own journey, my own privilege, being able to then use that to be able to enable others. Some of the things that we've been able to do is with Tech Moms, we did Tech Moms Latinas. We're working on a Tech Moms in Color, helping more women of color understanding that need. We've been very intentional of making sure we have over 40% of our cohorts are women of color. It's something where it becomes part, once you're aware, you can't go back, right? And I think creating that awareness for each of us, regardless of our identities and who we are, knowing that there's ways that we can help, however we can create that impact. And so I think from a business perspective for Black leaders and being able to get access to that network, being able to get access to capital, all of those things are areas where I feel like I can help, or how can I use my influence for that? I think those are important perspectives. But I would love to open it up to the rest of our esteemed panel on this question, because I know each perspective brings a lot of value here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Trina, I think you hit it right on the nail. I just want to piggyback and add to awareness. We acknowledge that Black Americans hold a significantly less business equity, right, than their white business counterparts. So I think you mentioned impact, and I'm going to add as well, intentionality. If we're able to build a supportive ecosystem for Black-owned businesses, and I love the fact that August has become, a month where we can, at least kick off all year long, but a month where we intentionally are supporting Black-owned businesses. And so by building those supportive business ecosystems, we can either navigate or mitigate any of the structural effects that have been in the past, and just building on, as you mentioned, Trina, with the network, access to capital, adding on to almost, I think last time I read, and I think it was McKinsey put out a report that it would add on 290 billion in business equity if we had those supportive ecosystem structures. So just adding on to what you were saying, but thank you so much, Trina, for your input.
Yeah, same here. I'm going to chime in as far as awareness. Awareness is so key. The Black community is the largest consumer spender in the United States of America. And so there's a huge disparity between, there's the large consumer spender, but then those same folks aren't able to get the access to the capital to be able to have thriving Black businesses. So I think the awareness is key. And what was considered the norm before, it was uncovered, certainly in recent years, that it's, we need to progress even more than we have in the past.
Thank you so much. So much rich conversation going on. That goes perfectly into my next questions for you, Zuleemah. Before you were able to climb the corporate ladder to become a leader in your career, did you face inequities as an entry-level employee?
This is an interesting question. First, really quickly, I'd like to thank Canarys for inviting me to have a seat on this panel. I'd also like to add that I am humbled to participate on this panel with such dynamic co-panelists. And thank you, Mortasia, for the great introduction earlier. So have I experienced inequity, or did I experience inequities as an entry-level employee? Not at first, but eventually. I always like to say that my career began while I was in college, interning at Coke and GE through the INROADS program, shameless plug there. So my summer internship experiences were incredible. INROADS has always done an outstanding job of equipping its partners with the proper tools and resources on how to foster a great work environment for diverse employees. And so I experienced that firsthand many moons ago as an intern. Also at my first position out of college at a company called Jones Lang LaSalle and their investment management group, continue to have a great experience along my career journey there as well. It wasn't until a few years after I graduated, I was at another firm where I was I became eventually one of only 2 women in the department. And not to mention, I was eventually the only person of color in the department as well. So the 2 inequities that I recall experiencing still early in my career was pay inequity and feeling undervalued. I became aware at this particular firm that one of my colleagues who started at the company at the same time that I did, he had less experience than I did. Actually, he came from a completely different industry and was pivoting in his career. He was offered a higher salary than I was. And then of course, secondly, feeling undervalued earlier on in your career, when the market crashed and there were layoffs that occurred, being amongst kind of the first to go along with others. So those were certainly 2, inequities that I experienced earlier in my career.
Thank you. And continuing that conversation, Zuleemah and Stacey, as women of color, what unique obstacles do you still face as leaders?
I'm going to go back to when I first became a leader. An obstacle that I faced, I was leading a large team on a project, and I was the youngest person on the team, and a woman. And so what was interesting, I had 3 things going, probably age, gender, and perhaps color. I went from being a colleague, amongst my colleagues, working just, equally as a colleague, to now leading my colleagues as a younger woman in a certain position. And so it was certainly an adjustment for us all. I had to certainly leverage my highest emotional intelligence in leading a team as a younger woman.
Wow. Thank you. Stacey, do you have anything to add?
No, I was going to add too. I would say one of the most unique obstacles for me, my lived work experiences, the challenge would probably be the invisibility of our community and all of the narratives of leadership. I mean, I would say it's scarce or rare to see a Latina, either at the corporate board or in Fortune 500 CEO positions. In fact, I think only 1%, which I believe in 2020 makes only 59 Latina women that were part of Fortune 500 companies. So because of that scarcity, it's just hard to find those trailblazers. I mean, there's many that are, but I would say that the biggest obstacle facing myself as a leader is that, right? However, part of those obstacles and challenges, I like to turn them into opportunities, right? Being perhaps the only one, or I started my career in healthcare administration. I always found myself being either the only Latina or the youngest administrator. So I faced many workplace inequities. So this is very personal to me. But being the only one, I try to see that as a strength, right? How can I support and be that voice as I'm supporting and mentoring and coaching others and others that see me as a leader. So I would say that channeling that obstacle or challenge into a positivity has been something very beneficial for me in my career.
Wow, really taking advantage of opportunity. I know that you made some great points on things that you that struggle with. What do you personally feel like is the biggest struggle that you face in the workplace currently, and why is that? What do you think that you have the potential to be fixed about those or improved about those?
Yeah, so representation, certainly. We've come a long way, but we still have a long ways to go. specifically around supporting women, I would also say. According to the Bureau of Land Statistics in 2019, the workforce was comprised of, these numbers are interesting, 57% of women and 69% of men. Needless to say, it's obvious that men are still leading as far as the leading gender in the workforce, but there's still a large part of the population that are women. So I would say providing women with further support and accommodations in the workforce. There's an entire spectrum in which organizations and companies can invest into a female employee in the workplace and become a workplace or an employer of choice, including egg freezing fertility benefits, childcare, hybrid remote working for moms, longer maternity leaves, and the list goes on and on. And simply equal opportunity for even the working mom and giving her opportunities for upward mobility, regardless of how much she's juggling in her personal life, as well as just providing support for women in ways that will allow her to effectively excel in her position.
Wow, thank you so much. So now we'll move on to my questions for Stacey. Why is it important for you to work in an organization that focuses on creating more inclusive working environments for other companies?
Okay, no, thank you for asking this question. I would just say this in one sentence, Canary in the coal mine. And I'll explain this more and elaborate why it's important, and I'm honored and humbled to be working here with the Kanarys family. So many years ago, coal miners would take the canary, the bird, right? The coal mine would produce an odorless, tasteless gas, carbon monoxide, which is deadly to a human being. And so what the canary, the bird would do is that if it showed any distress, it symbolized, it gave an alert that it was an unsafe, unhealthy place to be. So it's personal to me to know that I, at this given moment, am the canary in the coal mine for many organizations and DI leaders and champions, where I can help. And I think it's the first time in my career where I can say that I am directly involved and impacting the lives of employees, right? Because employees were all humans. And so it brings me so much honor to know that I'm working with very forward-thinking organizations that are transforming and recreating how they're evaluating and advancing and promoting diversity, equity, inclusion. So for me, it is very important. In fact, it is very personal for me to work in an organization that truly embodies a mission, a purpose, where we are the canary in the coal mine for many organizations and individuals that truly believe that we can make this a reality, right? We are working towards making spaces and places where people can come to work, whether it's remote, hybrid, whichever environment that is set. We want to make sure that we can become that canary. And so, as I mentioned to you, for me, I don't take this lightly. In fact, it's, like I mentioned, very personal, that working at this very moment with Kanarys is a mission for me. So I'm excited, and I'm also very honored that I'm here with these great panelists. So I'm glad Kanarys was able to create the space for us to truly be transparent, right? And provide the impact and the intentionality a lot of organizations are intending or in that journey to do so.
Thank you. And that moves on to my next question, which makes me curious. What do you know about the glass cliff phenomenon and the idea that women are often promoted in companies during times of crisis, or when company is undergoing a recession, or when they are in higher likelihood of failure? What is your take on this? What do you think?
This is an excellent question. And I'm also going to open it up to our panelists. I'm going to take a quick stab on this. So I think there's a familiar approach to this term that most of us are either aware, and a lot of organizations have addressed it, and that's the glass ceiling, right? Where there is that invisible barrier where it prevents women to reach higher positions. So I just wanted us to recap that term because it does flow into a more I would say damaging facet of the phenomenon, which is the glass cliff, right? And I'll be very transparent. I myself had to even look it up because it was at one point told, or at least shared with me, I would say maybe 5 years ago. And so and so I'm glad we're bringing this up because it is a term that's either, talked a little bit about, right? Or there's not much to know about it. So I would say my take on it, on the glass cliff, is practically it's a trap. Right? The trap of promoting or hiring a woman for a job where there's no chance of you showing success, right? You're already set up for failure. That's how I see it. That's my take on it. So in order for me to, even when I'm sharing and working with organizations, is the first step in preventing that is just knowing what it means, right? Detecting that it's happening, or knowing that it is happening to you, right? Knowing the concept. And so as we go back about the glass ceiling, the glass cliff, right? Organizations are looking to intentionally, and this is just my experience of working with current organizations, they know it's there, it exists, right? Can we detect it? That's the $1 million question. And so when I am looking at the glass cliff and the phenomenon, I think the most important thing is knowing what actionable things can we take away to protect yourself from being part of the glass cliff. So there are 3 things that I would say would be as a takeaway, is knowing, just deeply understanding the proposed challenge, right? As you're interviewing or you're applying for jobs, is really understanding the situation, the real situation facing the department, the proposed role and title. You're interviewing the company. So it's best do as much research as possible, any news, media out there. It's better to understand what's truly happening. And of course, you can't know all of the internal doings, but publicly, what is happening to the organization, right? I think the second one is the hardest, paying attention to your own ego. I say that because we all have our ways, and it's very hard to just say, hey, I have an ego. I want to succeed. I want to excel. So I would say that as women, I can only speak for myself. I am naturally nurturing, and I like to save the world. I think that also comes from being a older sibling, being the savior of the world and paving the path, etc. We have to really understand and assess what are our real intentions with the promotion or the role that you're applying for, or what the scenario looks like. We don't want to fall in that trap, or as we call the glass cliff. So I would say that's the second one, just paying attention, being true to yourself and authentic. What are you really feeling, right? Just putting your ego aside. And then lastly, if you are determined to face the challenge and you understand that the organization is going through some organizational changes, or perhaps you've read in the news that there's a bit of turmoil, is putting yourself in that leading role, having a supportive ecosystem, negotiating what you can do, right? Because you don't want to set up yourself for failure. Being very transparent with the company. Hey, I know that this is happening. I see it happening. This is how I can contribute to the best of my ability if I'm given those tools. So there's a lot of negotiation. So I just wanted to share that. It was very insightful as I was talking to others. In fact, last night I was calling my friend. I'm like, what do you know about the glass cliff? Have you experienced it? And she's like, maybe I have, but I didn't even know about it. So it is a very unknown, and a lot of people don't talk about it. So the more we talk about it, it'll just be as equal on the phenomenon of the glass ceiling. So I hope that was helpful. I'm not sure, Zuleemah or Trina, if you have any thoughts on that.
This is the first I've heard this term myself.
Oh, wow.
So I'm learning. I'm just taking it in, and I'm reflecting. I'm probably, a lot of our listeners are going through that same process of like, have I dealt with this? Like, is this happening to me? Like I'm going through that, and I'm like, yeah, I have, and I'm have experiences that I have gone through that are like this, where I remember an interview where they were like, Kate, we're going to hire for this, but you can't tell so because this is going on. I'm like, this is all red flags, right? Like, I am not going to be set up for success. I think for me, kind of what I was reflecting on what I would do, and I think this fixes a lot of different issues, especially in diversity, equity issues, is being results focused. And if you can go in and you're talking about, Stacey, your negotiation, if you can go in and instead of talking about the tasks that need to be done, talk about what are the results and timelines and expectations.
Got it.
What am I going to be working towards? What is the end goal? What does success look like? And have them clarify that, because once you come to that agreement, they can't back out and you fall off a cliff in failure, because that's the expectation that you've set, you're working towards. You can adjust it, but those ongoing conversations on what does success look like solves promotion issues. It solves this glass cliff issue. It solves some of the inequities. Really stay focused on results. And those conversations are critical with your leadership teams.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something earlier, Stacey. You said you're a nurturer and you like to fix stuff. And oftentimes I feel as though women are open to coming in and fixing things or saving the day at any means necessary, by any means necessary. And so I think having balance and having boundaries as to what exactly does that mean is important. We saw a lot of women become promoted and be in positions of leadership during the pandemic here in the last few years. And they were women that were certainly qualified for the job at any point in time. But we saw them rise to these positions, particularly during time of crisis. And so I do think that when that does happen, it's important, as Trina said, to make sure you outline exactly, what the expectations are, what are the goals are, but more importantly, what is your career goal? What is your end goal for your career? And does this fit into that or not? And not doing it because just for the title, but does this really fit into what your goals are for your own career?
Love that.
Thank you. It sounds like you women have a lot of discernment and self-awareness that really helps you in your fields. Very amazing. So my last question for Stacey would be that in general, do you think companies have been taking the right steps in creating fair systems? What do you think is important of addressing company systems and frameworks as opposed to one-time solutions?
That's a mouthful. That's a great
Yes.
question. Okay, so let me just make sure I heard correctly. So the question is, in general, do I think companies have been taking the right steps, right?
Yes.
To creating fair systems. So I would say in the past 3 years here working at Canarys, I always say this, I'm very humbled. I speak to thousands, I would say hundreds here at the team, speak to many, many diversity, equity, inclusion leaders, practitioners, champions. And more often, I would say that the intention is there to kick off that journey, right? We all are here to make workplaces more inclusive, meaning we want our employees or workforce to feel like they belong, that they're respected, that they feel seen, that we're capturing their spirit of being seen. And so before we do that inclusion, we want to make sure that the systems, we're in a very level playing field. And so my question, or I guess not my question, but what's generally happening is that companies want to take the right steps. Do they know what those right steps are? I think that's the question, right? And then the other question is that I often get is how do I even start? Where do I start? What should be that small bite of the apple? And so that's where I love, I get the chance, my team and I get the chance to really go one-on-one. Most of our calls and meetings, I love to call them, they're pretty much like therapy sessions. We have such an opportunity to talk about what steps can I take that are personal or at least customized to my organization and the goals that we're aiming to do. So I would say in general, what a lot of the companies are doing, yes, they are taking those steps very differently with the same result, that they all want inclusive and equitable workplaces. What most of them are also aiming to do is looking at their systems, looking and assessing at their policies, procedures, the employee life cycle, looking at it from a quantitative and qualitative stance, having an equity lens to it. So that way we're all building upon, whether it's your diversity programming or, let's say you want to deploy an assessment to anonymously see their lived work experiences. We need to make sure that we have that very level playing field. And so we do that because we find that sometimes systems can perpetuate inequities. So as organizations kick off and agree to partake in an organizational systems audit, they're truly saying, you know what, before we build upon any programming, I will make sure as a leader that I take the accountability, the transparency, the impact and the intentionality to grow and create opportunities that are fair and equal to all of the employees, right? Regardless of what their identity is. So at Canarys, what we've done with a lot of our company partners is that we help them assess their recruitment systems, what are their hiring, retention, their professional development, their learning and development, looking at prioritizing and what is their commitment to DEI. So we have ways to create that audit, and it's ongoing, right? So that we can have a baseline. What is the comparison? So those one-time solutions are a great start. They're not, I mean, there's no right or wrong. It's just that we have to have a way to create sustainability. So those organizational systems audit are very crucial. And I find that companies are heading in that direction. So they are taking the right steps. I've also noticed, I also want to add to that, that a lot of organizations call it DEI, or there's the acronym of EDI or JEDI, right? There's so many acronyms out there. But I've noticed a lot of leaders intentionally call it EDI because they say without equity, placing equity before diversity and inclusion, there's intentionality to that, right? We have to have equity in order for inclusion to build up and diversity. So I say all this to say that generally companies that are really looking to be forward thinking, that are looking to be transformative. In fact, I did not coin this, but I always like to say that we're still, probably at the tail end of the Great Resignation, but we're embarking in the great experimentation, where a lot of organizations are willing to be creative. They are what they did 5 years ago, or even a month ago. They're like, what can we do to evolve and make this different? So we have a different outcome. We're driving and promoting diversity, equity, inclusion. So I leave this to say that kudos to all of the organizations and companies that are looking to think differently, that are open to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, that are looking to create a very level playing field before building upon that, having a strong foundation. So I'm excited for all of those organizations that are just looking to be creative, because DEI there's a lot of nuances to that, and there is no one size fits all. And so that's where the canary in the coal mine comes in, where we want to be that canary to help before it impacts the health of the company. So I hope that brought some perspective. Again, there's no right or wrong, but companies are all heading in the right direction.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to open up the questions to all the panelists. So you could please answer in maybe a sentence or two. How would you personally describe the feeling of being the only woman and or person of color in a room to someone who has never experienced that scenario?
I'll take that. I'll go first here.
Okay.
And to sum it up in one sentence is kind of hard, but if I had to sum it in one sentence, I would share that it feels like being a unicorn that has to deliver to the highest level.
Very
I think I'll go next. I would say in one word, the song, "You Won't Break My Soul." That song, but that truly is, I think, in one sentence, where you're the only one. I have the tendency to protect myself, right? And be that one person where I'm reflecting the voices of the many communities, or the communities that I identify as Latina and or Hispanic. When you're that only one person, again, channeling it to positivity, I will see that as a strength, not as a stigma.
Yes.
And being able to just share my thoughts openly, having the responsibility to share the obstacles and challenges that the communities are facing. And if you put that in a work perspective, just being open and sharing the fact that yes, there are, communities within our workforce that are struggling or are burning out, right? So again, I would say one word, "You Won't Break My Soul." That song keeps playing in my head when I think of that.
I love that. I'm going to be thinking that the rest of the day.
Same here.
The background, the song.
I know, we're going to have that as the play out on, and then
the theme song for the webinar.
Right. The theme song for this panel.
Yes.
I think if I were to, this is a tough one, because every scenario you have a different emotional reaction to. It's not like there's one word, right? Because when you hit it, it's like sometimes catches you so off guard, you don't even know like how to think or react. And other times this is a really hard question, but for me, what I would say and what I wish I would have known is resilience, but being vocal. Early on in my career, your question earlier on, did you see it early? I saw it from the moment I got hired in my first interview, my first day on the job. Like, it has been part and probably what drives my passion so much now to create change is because I've lived this day in and day out for my whole career. Like, there probably hasn't been a day where it was like, okay, there's always something. And I think that resilience to just move through it. But what I wish I would have known very on in my career is to be more aware of some of these things, like the glass cliff. Like, I'm still learning, right? But early on in my career, becoming more aware that sexism is real, that we should talk about it, that we shouldn't just take it, that we should be able to identify it when it's happening and say something. And it took me decades to start speaking up on my own behalf. And I think that's important for us to find that. And, for those that haven't ever experienced it, it is hard to understand. And the best way I've seen for some of the allies, because I do a lot of training on allies and becoming allies, when you go to an event and you're the only man or maybe the only white man or something like that, and how do you start having those experiences and get uncomfortable? Go to where you're most uncomfortable and see what that feels like, so you can bring that empathy and awareness to change and being intentional and put yourself, they say great leaders get comfortable being uncomfortable, unless it's DEI, and that's just too uncomfortable, right? Like, you got to get uncomfortable and start to recognize it and be open. I would say be open when somebody is vocal and saying, hey, this was really uncomfortable for me, or this situation happened. Being able to have those conversations are what's going to be able to create change. If we keep just being quiet and silent suffering, it's not going to change. And so I think the resilience is important, but being vocal for change, I think, is just as much important.
Thank you all so much. And this will be our last question. And I think it's really like a burning question our audience really wants to know. Have you ever been a part of a company that completely excelled in creating a fair work environment? And what do you think they did to help them achieve such success?
Well, I have the fortunate opportunity of working at a nonprofit organization where that's our lane of expertise. So for me, that company is INROADS, where I'm actually experiencing that, we're literally practicing what we preach internally, what we're, helping our corporate partners with externally. For us, it's an environment, that fosters growth while allowing employees the autonomy to reach their goals and objectives. And it's simple for us. Our organization and our CEO, Forrest Harper, puts into practice, as I shared, exactly what we're helping our clients do every day to create better and fair work environments for all. So things like surveys to attain feedback on how to enhance the work environment, of course, analyzing data and research of employers or workplaces of choice also help, and so much more.
Thank you. And I know, Trina, you had some good points earlier, even when we talked about tech mom.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to be founding an organization where you get to create these cultures. It's really fun, right? Like we hire, so our whole company or our nonprofit growth, we hire our tech moms. So all our employees, other than our 3 co-founders, are prior women that have gone through our program. And we have seen, we love attrition because I don't know any other organization. It's like, hey, we get to skill up, give them experience and move them on to these other amazing careers. And we've done that a few times. It's a little hard to work through because you're like, okay, we got to retrain the next person. But we're willing to go a little slower and be able to do that because we're creating those opportunities for the women we work with. On the other side of it, with the consulting work I've done, I haven't seen an organization that does this perfectly. There probably isn't one out there, ourselves included. There's always work to be done. And I think that's where a lot of organizations get overwhelmed, is that there is so much to do, right? It can become very heavy. And I think what's important, and the model that I use in creating strategies, is awareness to action, giving a lot of the steps that Stacey's talked about, as far as starting with where am I at today? Let's use data to baseline it. Let's understand where we're really at, and then being able to put steps in place to measure and move through into actually creating and change and impact. And the next thing, I think it's just knowing you start where you're at. And as long as you're doing something and you're making impacts, just, it's just going to take that continual effort, just like any other business aspect. It just takes continual work and focus in order to create that change.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you both for your perspectives. I think you're right, Trina. We have not found that company that has perfected workplace fairness, right? And that's fine.
Yep.
What I would say is that all of the organizations that we've had the pleasure to partner with, they're all willing to transform. I think I had alluded to the great experimentation. On that same vein, organizations, yes, we need to have tools. We need to have technology and data approach to provide those actionable insights. And then how do we make that into action? And how do we better serve our communities and our workforce? So yes, we do need the tools, but it's just more than that, right? It's a complete change of attitude. The company, I've noticed a lot of organizations are mission driven. Their goal and their destination, their results is to become an organization that has more fairness, that is more inclusive and diverse. So this question is hard. It's hard, but it's doable. It's achievable. I think that at this given moment, we haven't found that perfect formula. I think it's just the intentionality, as I mentioned before, that a lot of organizations are going or have kicked off or are still in that journey of creating a fair work environment. So I think that the reason why they've kicked off and they found some success or in the journey to success is because of their attitude, right? They're looking for transformational behavior change. And so with that in mind and that mindset, I think everything else is doable. So that's why we're here. And very much like Zuleemah and Trina. And Zuleemah, I'm excited. I'm very happy that we actually work as partners in INROADS and Canarys. So we're in this together. And yeah. And so for that, I will say one thing, that the companies, that the organizations that are truly working to be a fair work environment, I would say that most of them, and I'm going to use your word, Trina, resilient. They're very flexible and they're open to see what data is out there, either if it's good or, as they like to call it, dirty laundry. It's all right. It's all right to share that because it holds us accountable. Employees are holding leaders accountable. The leaders in exchange are also holding the employees to say, okay, well, we're providing this platform, this ecosystem, let's do something about it together. So it's a two-way street.
And I also love to open all these questions up to anyone in the audience. If you have any questions for our panelists today, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. In the meantime, I have a question of my own. As a young woman of color going into the workforce, do you have any advice for developing this mindset of, being cautious and having a full perspective of bird's eye view, such as what's going on and how to protect yourself?
Yeah, I would suggest starting with making sure that you have what I like to call a village around you, that you certainly have mentors that can help lead, guide folks that are, way advanced in their career, that's been there, that can help check some of your blind spots as well.
See if there's any questions
Yes,
that or in the Q&A.
I'm waiting, patiently waiting. Mm,
Mhm.
So I want to ask all the questions at once.
I know, let's not be shy. I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there.
Or that could mean that we were great at articulating it, yeah, for each question, and so they don't have any questions.
I would be curious to know for those that are, joining us in the webinar today, any DI leaders or practitioners that have started their journey in DEI, or what have they currently been doing to provide a space for women, provide a safe space for women. I would say that'd be the question, since I know the topic of the webinar today is, keeping women in the workplace. Just curious whether it's putting words in the chat or curious to know.
I don't see any questions just yet, but I'd like to add that as being a part of WILD has really just opened my eyes and gave me a lot of experience I don't think I would have had unless I was granted that opportunity. And of course, being here with such an amazing panelists and talk to such amazing women that have held such high positions of leadership and really own those positions of leadership. So I'm very appreciative of that and of that space and allowing me to have a voice where typically in a lot of spaces I wouldn't have had that voice without that program.
Thank you. Oh,
Since
thanks, Grace.
I know, thank you all so much. I think since we don't have any questions today, I feel like you ladies did a wonderful job of, I guess, answering and being very vocal about everything. So I think we're gonna wrap it up, and I want to thank the audience so much for joining us today and these amazing panelists, and thanking these amazing panelists as well. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, I would just like, oh, go ahead.
I was going to just say thank you for having me.
that-
I've been in this today as well. Thank you.
Yeah,
And I
no,
was going to thank Mortasia for being such a great, sorry, we keep talking at the same time. I was going to thank Mortasia for being an excellent moderator for us today.
Thank you.
yes, likewise. Thank you all, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm sure we're all going to have a strong ending to 2022. Unbelievably,
Yes.
I can't believe it's September and about to be October and the holidays. But just wishing everyone a great time, and I hope that we can all connect in LinkedIn, and hope to cross paths either virtually or in person with everyone in the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.